So welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we have Adam Sewell from Digital Spark Studios. I hope I said your last name right. As I was saying it, I was like, I don't know.
Close. We'll call it close enough, huh? It's been butchered my whole life, so it's fine.
How do you say it properly?
It's Sewell. It's just like
Sewell.
Sewell, yeah. Just kind of flow through all the letters and it just becomes one mush.
One mush.
Why don't we start with a little intro about who you are and a little bit about who Digital Sparks is.
Sure. So we're based in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. We're a video production company down here. We started out about 8 years ago now. 2015 is when we filed for our LLC officially. Back then we were working full-time jobs. I say we, me and my partner Joshua. We were working for a 3D printing company in the manufacturing space, one of the biggest ones in the world, and they had a very small marketing team. And it was Joshua and I who were in charge of doing all the global marketing for visuals, so video, photography, motion graphics, graphic design, that kind of stuff. We were in charge of handling that side of the business. And from there, we basically said, all right, we're traveling around a lot. We're doing some cool projects. They're sending us all over the world to do this stuff. This is great. But it kind of gave us a taste as what could have been. So when I came into the company and Joshua was already there, we kind of immediately gravitated together and was like, all right, let's do this, but on a bigger scale. Let's serve more customers, tell different stories. And that's kind of how we got started. And again, so 8 years later, we're still doing our thing, just trying to improve every day.
Nice. So 8 years, it's you and another business partner. We don't often see a lot of other companies that have two business partners. So I'm just wondering, how's your dynamic with each other?
And I understand why. And Joshua would say the same thing, trust me. So we've gone through difficult patches and it's like a marriage. There's compromise, there's communication, obviously at the forefront of everything. The dynamic to start with was, we both did everything for everyone. We had a little bit of a handle into the business and into the creative process. But, we were first-time business owners, so we were making it up as we go along, like most people, and we still kind of are doing that today, even though we have a little bit more experience. But it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago now that we really sat down and figured out what we want to do and how we make this a little bit more official and make this a little bit more structured. And that's when I took control of more of the client-facing communication side of things, talking with clients, bringing in new clients, onboarding, and everything up until the creative discussions start. I still have a handle in that, but that's where Joshua comes in. He's one of our lead directors. He directs most of the stuff that we do to a certain scale until we need to bring in external help. So yeah, Joshua kind of oversees the project from start to finish from a creative standpoint, where I project manage per se, from more of a client-facing financial kind of standpoint there.
That sounds so familiar to us in a way, because it was also for us same thing. About 4 or 5 years into it, we kind of sat down and started restructuring everything, and I guess we're just basically maybe 2-3 years behind you guys. I guess based on what I'm hearing, right, Kyrill?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was partially because of the pandemic, which forced us to really reflect on that. Was there a similar kind of aha moment for you guys where it was like, okay, this is how we've been kind of operating for the last 5 years, like you said, as if you're doing everything? What was the thing that kind of got you thinking, oh, maybe we need to relook at the business and how can we actually treat it as a business? Was there a moment like that?
I wouldn't say there was one specific moment, more of a culmination of small moments that came to a head, to put it, in that way. There was, an element of maybe kind of resentment on both our parts to between what we were doing in the business. Obviously now it's so clear that Joshua is more creative leaning, and I'm a lot more, I guess, more worried about the relationships on the front end and building those and creating a good first impression with clients and getting them on board and getting them understanding what we can do and what our capabilities are. So it was just through trial and error and going through those rough patches that it really just came out the other end in that, all right, we've got to change something. And then that ultimately led us to being okay, we're a business. Let's be a bit more serious about the way we structure this thing.
I think it's very common with a lot of the companies, especially when there are more people involved. As you start working together more and more, you start understanding how the business works, who has strengths in what areas. and it's good to let people kind of lean into those a little bit more. That way, like, no one can do everything on their own. You know, you have to let certain people take the lead on certain aspects of the business in order for it to grow down the road.
Absolutely. And just embracing that, and just if anyone is, you know, even a few years behind us and where you guys are, just like embracing that early on is I think only a good thing. You know, when you're very early on, you're wearing a lot of hats anyway, and that's still going to be true very early on. But just deciding like which kind of, you know, if there is a lean or a decision in a certain side of the business, maybe one person takes it and the other person takes the other stuff. I think just kind of starting off with that at the forefront of your thinking is a good way to move forward for sure.
That definitely happens too when the workload becomes greater. Because if you're wearing all those hats and the workload starts to increase, then you realize after a while you're like, I don't even have the patience to like fight for that type of this. It's like, look, if you're good at that, just you take care of it. I don't care. Like, I got other stuff to focus on, you know?
Yeah. It's knowing when to let go on certain parts of the process where it's not necessary to fight on. Like, I remember when we were first starting out, every single step of the process, it was like we had a committee meeting, Dario and I, where we were like, all right, should we cut out this shot from the video? And then we would both be like talking about whether we should or shouldn't. Whereas like now we've gotten to the point where we work together long enough that we can trust each other's judgment on a lot of aspects of the whole process, where it's like, if one of us says they can handle something, trust them to handle it so that, you know, you could focus on other things. Because there's only like 8 to 10 hours in a day that you could spend working. You know, you can't do every single part of the business or dedicate time to it.
Yeah, and you naturally want to focus more on certain things as time goes by. You're like, okay, I like Adam, like you were saying, you like more of the client relationship side of things, so you want to focus more on that. So you're like, okay, I'd rather deal with that than dealing with maybe like the accounting or whatever, right? So you're naturally drawn to different sides.
I was just gonna say that accounting is something that you should still always be well versed in, no matter what.
I was trying to think of an example.
That was the wrong example, Dario.
Marketing, maybe.
Marketing,
let's say
yeah.
Marketing. Throw in marketing instead of accounting.
Well, I think that chapter, we'll call it, of like starting a business early on, I think going through that chapter is really important, and is something that you should kind of experience to understand the inner workings. Because essentially, like, you go from working at a desk for a company next to someone for a long period of time, and you know you get to know them on a certain level, but you go into business ownership together, that relationship takes a quick, you know, it amplifies significantly. And to go through those chapters where you're kind of button heads and maybe kind of stepping on each other's toes and kind of like you said, they're in the room just kind of hashing out decisions on a granular level for every decision that needs to be made. I think that's important, but, you know, equally as important is coming out the other side with like, you know, a solution to like what that is, because I think going through that helps you understand people on a different level, for sure.
What would you say you're dealing with now as like like, you know, back then you were dealing with how do you split roles between you, the partnership and everything? Like, what are some of the issues you're dealing with now? Not even issues, but like
maybe challenges or
like bumps
yeah.
on the road.
Bumps. I don't know if I'd call it bumps. One of the main things that as a video production company, and I'm not sure if you experience it, I know a couple of production company owners that do, is the infrequency of cash flow. And what I mean by that is there is no telling what next year is going to look like from a forecast standpoint, really. You know, you can understand that you're growing year over year, great. But what does that year look like? Is February going to be amazing next year for no reason? Is it going to be May? Because May is usually quite a strong month for us. Is it going to be May, or is May going to go quiet? Having that kind of like forecasting is really at the forefront of my mind. And that comes from, you know, just trying to make it a little bit more consistent, looking forward, you know, always having in the back of the mind that this could be potentially a sellable entity one day, and having that forecast and that predictable cash flow is really important with that in mind. So like diversifying our income is a big thing. So I mentioned before we started to talk, like rental equipment, studio. Like we just built a studio at the beginning of the year that is now available for rent for production companies and clients directly as well, that they can come in and use. But so stuff like that, which has had a little bit more control, where we can put things out there and say, okay, these are available. And that gives us, you know, different ways of bringing in predictable income, and rather than just relying on, whether a client needs a video. Because you've probably experienced that you can't just necessarily put a Facebook ad out and say, hey, we do this video. Okay, how much is it? Oh, it's over $10,000. I'm not going to make that decision on a whim, right? That's not going to happen. It's something that needs to be nurtured, and something that is, it's hard to master. And I'm not ashamed to admit that it's something I'm working on every day, is to figure out like how to make that a little bit more predictable, for sure.
You were mentioning about the importance of diversifying your incomes. And I think that's something a lot of production companies struggle with because of that lack of knowing what to predict in like the coming years, right? And I find a lot of the time it's like, what was our average income in this year? Okay, let's not expect that. And let's plan for if we had like, say, half of that or less than that, and then that way, if you do better, then you can do better. But one part I actually like that you mentioned was opening up a studio and kind of like leaning into that almost like as its own business, because that is actually something Dario and I have talked about a lot. And I'm sure a lot of production companies are thinking to themselves, like, what would it take to actually start a production studio specifically, like a space of like, say, 2,000 square feet, 3,000 square feet, whatever it might be. Like, how did you guys go about that process and how long did it take?
So we've been in this space, this echo chamber that I'm sure you can maybe hear a little bit of, for three and a half years now. And it's a great space, 25-foot ceilings, lots of room to just kind of do, host video shoots. So lots of opportunities and stuff, but we didn't ever had anything that was like official, like a production space in it. We've got our desks, we've got seating areas, we've got storage space for our equipment and stuff, but we're like, okay, this is something that we could utilize. It's like a twofold thing, right? Like we could definitely utilize it and others could definitely come in and rent it and utilize it themselves as well. So it was like a win-win, and it seemed like it was just something that we probably should have done sooner, just because we're in a space that lends itself well to it. And we just said, okay, how can we do it and how can we do it right? So we put a lighting grid in. We have some lights attached to it that are part of the rental rate. And we have a seating area for clients where they can stream what's coming out of the camera to the TV. How do we do it right? Yeah, so that's kind of like what led us to it. And to kind of go back and answer your question is like, we should have done it sooner. Like that's really like what it boils down to. I wish we did it a couple of years ago, but we just weren't really sure that if this was the space that we were going to stay in for long enough to do so. So yeah, we built it ourselves from the ground up. Lots of 2x4s and lots of dust in the office for a long time, but it's great now. Yeah, love it.
How did you guys get a loan to be able to make all those modification and changes and additions, or did you guys just set aside money and then over time you guys had a big fund to be able to get everything?
Yeah, because it's a big investment. It's not something that you can just like pull out of like your bank account as a business, especially when you have such uncertain cash flows over time. You want to make sure you have enough to keep the business operating properly. Is it like something you had to set aside, as Dario mentioned?
I don't like loans, so no, we didn't get a loan or anything. This was just we're in a fortunate position to have enough cash on hand to do it, and we looked at it as like, all right, cash, and then in a spreadsheet, like what do we have to do? How many shoots do we have to book on this thing to pay it back? And it's just going to be a working document. So look at it as an investment more than an expense. So it should pay itself back over time.
Yeah, but I mean, one fortunate thing for you is that you guys were already in a space that luckily you can kind of adapt to what you needed. Right now we're still pretty remote with the way we work. And a lot of production companies are in a similar boat where typically you don't always need a production studio. So a lot of the time people will rent it out depending on the client projects that are needed.
At the most they'll have like an office space or whatnot, but
yeah,
actual like studio space is not that common, I would say. Well, I don't know, maybe it is more common, we don't know. But
because I'm wondering how it goes, like how you can go about finding like that right space where you'd have to rent, but then also you have to make all these modifications to do it. It's almost like a much bigger lump sum. Like I'm glad to hear though that for you guys it probably wasn't that bad because you were already in it, and it was just a matter of modifying some things as you went along, rather than one thing completely at once.
Yeah, you nailed it there. That's really it. It's been a long-term project, and that's probably why that we didn't do it sooner, is because we looked at it as like a bigger project that was going to incrementally improve and serve what we needed to serve over time. And another thing I should have mentioned earlier, is that one of our like our co-tenants in this space, so we work in like an industrial park type space, is also kind of like benefiting from having it here as well. So they want photography. They're in like the flame retardant apparel industry, and they need like photography and video of their apparel as that comes out. So it was also like a guaranteed kind of like consistent revenue stream straight off the bat from them, because they need to churn that stuff out, and we have the space. Nice. And they were like, all right, yeah, if you build that space, we've got work for you. That helps mitigate the risk. So good.
That's really good to hear that. You know, because Kyrill and I were talking about it, and it's in our long-term plan, but it's good to see like how other people are doing it. And another thing I really liked is that you were mentioning the diversification of income, because I don't think it's something a lot of us think about too often, because we just think, okay, we do video production, so we'll obviously just provide videos to our clients, right? But like you were saying, you got to think about other more, you know, stabilized sources of income. So like the rental space, you'll be able, I guess over 5+ years of doing it, you'll be able to gauge like an average of what the monthly income from that will be. And then you were also mentioning equipment rental, right?
I guess the key takeaway for people listening is that you don't have to do everything all at once, and plan for it in kind of stages. And I think that's what will make it a lot more digestible. Like, say, for example, first find a space that you can work out of, see if that works financially, then slowly add other aspects to it. Maybe you can get it to that point. Not everyone has like $100,000 that they could just drop on renovating a whole space to be a studio, right? I mean,
there's probably more than that they spend on it.
Of course. But like the other thing is like, especially with these places, because you're renting these or like you're leasing out this space for like 3 to 5 years. What if you put all that money and investment into that space, and then all of a sudden the owner says, "Oh, sorry, you're gonna have to you're gonna have to move out." So that's another concern you have to think about later down the road.
So how's that work with you, Adam? Like, you guys haven't bought the actual space? You guys are just leasing it?
And that was in our thought process as we were putting it together. So we built it in a way so that we can reuse a lot of the materials that we used. So, you know, it's all 2x4s that are screwed together, so we can just disassemble it and reuse the material. Again, we built it ourselves, so it was kind of, the labor was essentially zero. And yeah, we just get like, and I kind of want to like reiterate what you just said there, is that, you know, we didn't start yesterday and build this, right? You know, like, we've been doing this for 8 years. We worked in the spare bedroom of my house when we first got started. There was 3 of us. We didn't even have 3 desk chairs. We didn't have, you know, like one of the guys that was working with us at the time, like, he was sitting on the floor, like HDMI into my TV that I had in the room. You know, it was awesome. Like, I love looking back and seeing that time, but like, you know, this is not something, you know, that I would recommend even for people to try and like get into, like, you know, early on. Go through those early phases, get to understand the business, get some cash, you know, like get the bank account where it needs to be, and then figure out what the right investment is. It's probably not a studio space to start with. Like, just figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, it's such a slow burn.
How are you managing, like, because now, okay, you have 3 sources of income. You have the video production side of the business, equipment rental, and the location space, the studio rental space. How are you managing all those 3? Because in a way, they could all be 3 different businesses, right?
It's a lot of time. You know, it takes a lot.
No sleep.
Yeah, well, I don't get a lot of sleep. I've got 2 little kids at home, so I don't get much anyway. But you know, when I'm awake, I'm barely here. Honestly, like, to be fully transparent, like, the rental side of the business is definitely a supplemental income. It's not something that we put a huge amount of focus on. It's there. It's like, we have it on ShareGrid, for example, and we get a decent amount of rentals on a monthly basis through ShareGrid, although they are crooks and they take away most of your money through the commission side of things. And then the studio rental is just getting up and running, right? So it's still very early on in its infancy, and like the business side of that is still developing. You know, we have the legal stuff in place and, like, you know, the contracts and everything, but this is something that is, again, going to develop over time, and how we're going to push this out to the masses and really figure out what we want to do with that. So I say all that to say, like, the main focus is still a video production company. You know, like, if there is a production company here in Charlotte that does the rental business and the video production company, and they do it so well. Like they have great reputation, awesome guys over there, and they've really nailed it. Like they're like some of the best guys that you could work with on like the rental side of the business, but they're also like have just like an incredible production company as well. So it's doable. I know they've got full-time employees on the rental side of the business. We don't have that. We're kind of tackling both. So definitely supplemental on the rental side on both studio and gear wise. Yeah.
One thing I just want to like highlight is that like when you're diversifying your income like this, you don't have to have each different source of income be its own business at the end of the day. If sometimes it can be like you're doing as a supplemental thing where it's very minimal effort, but to at least get something in return. Because you said, for example, you're using it through a certain website, these rentals. So yeah, they might take more of the cut, but they're handling all the messaging, all the chasing people, all the stuff that would take so much time that like it would take away from the big moneymaker, which is the production company itself, right? That is at the end of the day, the main source of income. If you can get rentals for like say an income of $1,000 a month for just a couple emails here and there a month, that's pretty decent. Whereas if you did $2,000 of income a month, but you have to spend like 2 hours daily making sure you're operating that process well, it's just, the point is like you have to be able to figure out how much time and effort will go into each of these sources of income, right? Like even if you did like affiliate marketing or something like that, if it's something as easy as just creating a link, it's low effort, some reward. You just have to balance it out.
For sure. And I kind of would say to that also, like it doesn't necessarily even have to be like a different line of business. It could also just be focusing on like the video production side of your business and saying, how can I get a little bit more consistency and predictable income? And you naturally probably lean towards more like a retainer type agreement, consistent, like ongoing work over a period of time. And we look at that as like a foundation, right? It doesn't have to be, it's not all going to be elaborate. Like it's not all going to be car commercials. It's not going to be like that type of thing. But if you have to do like corporate videos for, a waste management company that can book you in for 12, 18, 24 month contracts, and you can just then start to forecast, say, all right, we know we've got this. Can we allocate a percentage of this towards marketing? Can we bring someone in as a full-time employee because of this guaranteed income that we're going to have? That is also a really good way of saying, all right, we're a little bit more confident about the way that we can go into things. We can take on some more creative projects that are going to be in the portfolio, but we know that we've got this fallback work that is going to give us a certain amount of money on a monthly basis as well. So, it doesn't have to be a rental business or a different business. It can be just tweaking the business model a little bit.
You mentioned retainer projects. Have you found a lot of success with those?
Reasonable. The reason it's reasonable is when we don't like to be like that a la carte kind of like cut and paste production company. Our retainer models are a little bit different. They're essentially a bucket of money that depletes over time, but guarantees our availability. So say it's a 12-month contract, $100,000. They've got our services for $100,000 over the course of the next 12 months. And we, on a quarterly basis, we'll kind of revisit and say, all right, this is how much we've got left. What project's next? If it's a testimonial that costs them $10,000 to $15,000, all right, that just deducts from the $100,000, but guarantees our availability. So we'll just have to move around things to make sure they get it. But clients will pay to know that you are there at the drop of a hat, and that's the way that we structure it.
It's like a credit system almost in a way. And I actually that actually just reminded me of like a recent client project that we've kind of signed for the year as well, where it wasn't phrased as like a retainer model, but then if you look at it, it really kind of is. It's like for 4 quarterly videos in the year, you may not be getting paid on a monthly basis, but retainers don't have to be like a monthly thing specifically. It could be like a quarterly thing as well. It's like we know every quarter with this client, we're going to do this project, then this project, then this project. But I like your approach too, where it's like buying gift card almost in a way, like a gift card of $100,000.
And you can also you want to incentivize them as well, right? So maybe you give them a 10% discount, so they're getting $111,000 worth of stuff for $100,000, or so they're not going to sign it unless there's an incentive. Like, other than the convenience of you being available, I don't think that's enough to convince someone that they should sign that big of a contract. But if you say, all right, over the course of the year, you're going to save $10, $11, $12,000, then, the accountant team might pay attention.
Buy 4 videos, get 1 free.
Yeah, however you want to word it, right? Like, I mean, there's definitely ways. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to look at the financial side of that. So, like, are you you're locking them in for, like, let's say $100K, like, as soon as they sign the contract? Are you doing, like, they do quarterly payments to you, or is it
monthly? Yeah.
Monthly payments.
And it benefits us so much as well. Like, if their initial project is going to be a $30,000 project and they want to get started right away, then we would have that conversation. Say, all right, let's do like the deposit of 50% of the entire retainer, and then once we catch up to 6 months down the road or whatever it may be, or we make it $5,000 a month there on out for the rest of the duration of the contract. So
how do you go about bringing up that type of how do you say, agreement to a lot of clients? Because
you know what, Kyrill, to add on to that, do you find a lot of success with new clients or recurring clients?
It's a great question. No, it's definitely, you want to have a relationship, right? You want to make sure that you're going in. Figured. Yeah, 100%. I would never pitch. I would maybe mention it in passing, very casually, in some of our earlier conversations, as something to look forward to, or something we can explore down the road after initial 1 or 2 projects. But it's definitely something that would hit a lot harder once you start to develop an ongoing relationship, because then they can see the financials. If they've spent $20,000 with you over the course of 2 videos, and they've got 20 videos to do this year, and they know it's going to be $10,000 every video, you can easily show them the value over time if you were to do it that way.
You don't want to scare them right off the bat. And the funny thing is, I just thought of an analogy. It's like, imagine you go on a first date and immediately the first thing you're talking about is getting married. It's going to scare everybody away.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, it's so true, dude. Like, I mean, and yeah, you want to make sure that you're just knocking those first couple of projects out of the park, building that rapport with those human connections with the people who are going to ultimately vouch for you internally. If it's like the director of marketing, the whoever it may be, they're the ones that are going to be taking that up to the higher ups and say, hey, if we do this with these guys who are really good and have done great work for us in the past, we'll save this amount of money over a period of time. I mean, if you just look at it from like how they're going to present it to their internal team who they have to get approvals from, it makes a lot more sense that way.
Well, it comes down to numbers, right? Because if they then go and present it and they're like, look, we're going to save $20,000 a year, you'd have to be a fool not to take the vendor up on that option, because you're saving money, right? That's the whole
for sure
name of the game.
They have to go through your process. They have to go through it, and they have to see if they even like working with you at the same time, because that will help them kind of justify other parts of the process. Like, I feel like once we've worked with some clients for multiple projects over time, you also feel comfortable pitching ideas to them, because the one thing is that they will also appreciate is that you also understand their business a lot more. You can understand better what their needs are, what might work for them versus what might work for someone else, so that you're pitching something a little bit more tailored, and that relationship can build even more over time.
Do you ever get in touch with your clients? Like, I guess you obviously the ones that you're on a good basis with, and try to see what their marketing goals are for the year and whatnot, and see how you can kind of fit into that picture?
Absolutely. I was actually going to bring up that point. I'm glad you did. I always try to take it as someone who's interested in the bigger picture, because that's just ultimately what we do as video creators. We're just a part of the puzzle that is their marketing plan throughout the year. And to show that you have an actual interest in that early doors, early on in the conversation, is to show that you care about how they can get the best product to ultimately go towards that goal of that marketing plan. So yeah, trying to understand you can even ask them, ask them about budget, what is their marketing budget going forward? I'll ask that. And, sometimes they'll tell you, sometimes they'll, scoot around it like everyone else does. So, but that's like pulling teeth, getting budget talk.
Pulling teeth.
Yeah, it really is. But, to answer your question, yes, absolutely. Talk about the broader marketing plan, show that you care, show that you have an understanding of other parts of the broader marketing plan and how you might fit into it. So I think And that is just going to be like, oh, that's actually a really good point. I didn't think about that. You'll get that response a lot.
It's a collaborative effort over time, right? And it's not like you trying to pitch them something, you know, you also have to hear from them like what they need and what will probably help them over time as well.
Absolutely.
Probably just pitching it as like a free consultation call. Like you'll sign an NDA, whatever, just so you can get a bird's eye view on their whole marketing plan and then kind of see if where you can help them in, right?
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't bring up an NDA. I'd just try and like make it as conversational as possible and just let them volunteer information. If they're not, I wouldn't force it too much. But just showing that you're actually interested in that sort of stuff early on is kind of how I would take it. But I mean, by all means, try the NDA.
That's a good approach, showing that you care about your clients and how they're doing as well. Because that, I think, going from that approach makes it more casual, as you mentioned, not making it too formal, especially if nothing is in the works at that point, right?
And it will also help them like understand how like the video will fit into a campaign that they maybe haven't even thought about. They've got companies at a certain size, they've got like multiple campaigns running throughout the year, and they maybe haven't addressed like, okay, we've got a web landing page, we've got some graphic design, we've got some photography scale, but like we haven't really thought about video. But a video for this campaign would actually work really well, and it would just maybe if you can get them thinking about the ways that they can use you, it's, you know, they're obviously going to be able to convince themselves a lot more than you're going to be able to convince them.
We deal with a lot of B2B clients, so I'm finding that a lot of them don't have too many like crazy like marketing campaigns on the books, but they do need video content still. And a lot of them we're finding that there's a lot of different types of videos that they're lacking. So we were just talking amongst ourselves, and we were thinking of like maybe once every quarter or whatever, like once a year, just hitting them up and saying, hey, we were just thinking about you guys. We developed like a list of these types of videos that could benefit you. Because that's what we're noticing right now with a lot of our B2B clients.
They would probably appreciate the suggestion, right? The direction. I mean, we get clients a lot where they maybe haven't even started to explore video. They've got a pretty decently built out marketing team, but they've not really moved into the video space yet. So anytime that you can provide suggestions based on experience and like industry knowledge, most of the time they're going to be appreciative of that. And if it means, you know, touching base once a quarter to make those suggestions, then I think they would take those suggestions and run with them, you know. If they don't take them, at least you'll be at the forefront of their mind again.
Yeah, the other thing we're also finding a lot of success on is providing additional services like photography services. And right now with the podcast effect that we're developing this network of businesses, like not just across Canada, but now into the US, and, you know, next month probably into the UK as well. Like a lot of our clients are like, oh, okay, you know, we might have a headquarters over here that would you be able to grab some video footage for us of?
And it's nice to know these trusted partners in these other cities, because then you can also go to your clients saying like, hey, we've built a relationship with this company in, say, Charlotte, and they can probably help us out with this kind of project if you need help there. Having all these different kind of relationships built can really help in that sense as well.
Absolutely. Get that wider footprint.
Let's talk about the market over there in Charlotte. Like what's it like over there?
So in terms of like film community, we have a great film community in Charlotte. It's obviously it's not like Atlanta and it's not LA, but in terms of just like the talent and the people that we have at our fingertips here down, it's really cool. Like it's quite a tight knit community. Like most people know most people in the space, which is really cool. There's not many egos, which is, you know, obviously one of the main things that we look for when we're hiring crew. So it's awesome in terms of like industry down here. Charlotte's one of the banking capitals here, so we've got, you know, all the banks you can imagine.
Really?
Yeah. So yeah,
that's surprising. Wow.
That's our main industry down here. There's banking. There is a fair amount of manufacturing here as well. So there's a lot of businesses in those spaces, and yeah, it's really cool. And we're not far from Atlanta as well. So sometimes those things kind of filter out down this way. Because
like in Canada, at least like from our experience and people we've talked to, a lot of the time everyone tries to get to some of the bigger cities because there is a little bit more work. But then when we have guests and who are in smaller communities, is it very interesting to hear that kind of dynamic and how how tight knit the community is and how there's more of like a camaraderie. I find, like, from what I've understood, that everyone has, and it's interesting to hear that, because in the bigger cities, like here in Toronto, it's like it's a very hustle mentality that a lot of people have in comparison. So it's just interesting to hear that.
I think it makes sense naturally if you think about it. If you're in a small community, everyone knows everyone, you're not going to get anywhere if you're an asshole, right? You can't, because your name is just going to get tarnished so quickly. And, you know, we have that good old Southern mentality as well, where most people are mostly nice, even though most people aren't from Charlotte. We've got, for the most part, most people are nice down here. But once you get to those bigger communities, there are so many people to choose from, and not everyone knows everyone, and that leaves room for people who don't have everyone's best interest in mind, and egos can develop. So,
yeah, ego is a big killing force in the industry, and a lot of people are trying to get ahead as quickly as possible. And we get it, everyone wants to move forward in their careers, they want to grow their companies, but I feel like sometimes some people forget about the importance of building proper relationships over time, and that is one very key aspect in our industry, at least for longevity.
Absolutely. I will work with someone who is nice and hardworking over someone who has an ego and maybe does a little bit better work every day of the week. I have no interest in working with people who are hard to work with. Absolutely zero.
You should be having fun working with the people that you work with. It shouldn't be too transactional. Like, it's the second things seem a little too transactional, and there's no like chemistry between crew members and team members, then it's all like, what's the point of us even doing this at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's why we got into it, right? We enjoy what we do, and why would we move it into any other way or bring people on who challenge that? But tell me a little bit more about the Toronto market. I'm curious about. I want to know about you guys specifically, like the story behind you guys, and then a little bit more about like the Toronto market as well.
Dario,
Kyrill, do you want to?
Okay, I can do it.
you got. I was wondering if you got tired of saying it.
Yeah, it's what's funny is that we've gotten asked this question so many times now on the show that it's like it's becoming like a song and dance. Like, and I remember the very first episodes, we would be like going into very big detail, and then with each time we're asked, it gets more condensed, more condensed, more condensed.
Let me change the question then.
Yeah,
right?
sure thing.
To avoid just mind-numbing people. So like what excites you in your day-to-day job today as opposed to yesterday? Like what is exciting you in running the business and in the production space of what you do?
Ooh, okay, that's a good one.
On my end, I actually, the one thing I like about every day is that there's a potential for something new to come through the front door. And that's what I like about our industry, is that like you'd be working with some clients one day, and then all of a sudden an opportunity can come walking through the front door that just happens to kind of open the door to something completely different, and this especially happened when we started focusing more on our SEO and trying to get more searchable. And so now we're starting to get more and more leads from different industries that we never had before, because we used to be all word of mouth, right? Our industry is a word of mouth industry, and it's very rare.
There's people in similar industries that we're getting recommended to, but now it's like very, very diversified.
Yeah,
I think is the word.
So now it's kind of like there's like that exciting factor where it's like, I don't know what's going to come through the front door in the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next month, and it keeps you going.
I really like the client. It's funny. I'm like you, Adam. I really like the client communications part. I don't know what it is. It just like energizes me. I always feel like a lot of energy at the end of those calls, and I love talking to them about their project and everything. And the other thing I like as well is that whenever we are shooting, it's always something different. So we're experiencing something that I think we have one of like the best jobs out there, because we get to experience so many different jobs that I don't think anyone else has that opportunity. It's almost like we're doing like we're in the multiverse. It's like, oh, if I went in that career down that career path, that's what my day-to-day would have been like. If I went there, it would have been like that. That's the part I like as well, is that every time you're on set, it's always different. You get to see what other people are doing in the world, and I don't know, I just really like that. I also get bored easily, so it's like the perfect job for me.
A funny thing that I realized this actually really early on, even back in 2014, 2015, around the time we started, because we started while we were still in university at the time. And I remember we went to business school and everyone is working to get into a lot of these big corporations. You know, you have to start at very junior levels before you can even get the opportunity to work closely with some of the VPs or the CEOs and everything. And what made me laugh so much was that I'm still a student technically, yet somehow I am interviewing CEOs for these videos that other people I really have to bust their asses to get to that point. It was almost like a cheat code I felt like I hit at that point, because I mean, like starting in 2013, 2014, like, because I imagine, Adam, you started around a similar time as well, where that wasn't a time where like the video production company, like the smaller one model, was really established as a possibility. And it was almost like you're figuring it out as it goes and you're kind of growing with the industry. So it was interesting to kind of see how that growth became more normalized. And like now it's like anyone can grab a camera and then open up a corporation name and boom, there's a production company right there.
Yeah. It's very different now, but that's cool. I'm glad you guys shared that.
What about you? What excites you?
So I come from a background of sport. I played soccer in college. I played soccer every day for my whole life between like the age of 6 and 22. So very much in like just incremental improvement. So just like every day improving the company and its processes just slightly. You know, like I'm not in any rush to do anything. You know, I'm just, you know, want to just improve incrementally. So like at the moment, I'm in kind of a phase of just improving our client communication and improving the communication that we have at different phases throughout the production, and just making sure, because, you know, we're picking up bigger clients now and at different price points with different expectations, and they need a certain level of, you know, customer service throughout the journey, and they need to be involved at certain places where other, you know, smaller clients wouldn't, you know, they couldn't care less about, you know, maybe the versions of the script that are being iterated early on. But once you get to a certain phase, and these are national broadcast spots, they have a big say in it, of how they want things done. So without bombarding them with communications, but also conveying the messaging that they need to receive is a current like thing that I'm working through and kind of like trying to move throughout the company as well. So very boring answer, I understand that, but it's just like the incremental changes to get to somewhere ahead of where we are today tomorrow.
You know, the one thing I like about what you mentioned is the incremental improvements, because I feel like a lot of the time in our industry, we get bombarded with so many other production companies, especially on Instagram and everything. You're seeing like all these massive commercials or major projects that a lot of companies are doing. And you're thinking to yourself like, oh man, I feel like I can do that, but like I need to do. So then I have to go out there and like, I got to create like a massive commercial like this right now. It's like, yeah, you can't just do major jumps and things like that to improve. Like the key is to do small steps, because if you put too many large goals that you can't attain within a certain amount, that can almost demoralizing. I don't know if that's the word.
No, it is.
Demoralizing. And then if you could make it to the point where you're at least improving something in your business on a daily basis, even if it's small, like the small changes add up to something
brick by brick.
Big. Yeah. Like you can't just wake up tomorrow and like say like, I'm going to start a podcast and like, or start a show and be with like 50 episodes within like 50 days. Like it doesn't happen like that. And we also learned that in our own way, you know, by actually doing it.
You know, the other part of that too is that you need to be prepared for when those opportunities do come through the door,
Yeah.
right? Because if you do get that chance and you blow it, well, that's going to tarnish your rep.
Yep.
And also like just deep down you'll go, damn, I've really screwed that one up, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to ever be in that position.
Yeah, you got to put those reps in to be able to come out the other end and be able to do it when called upon. But I think another way to do it is just like, we've been talking about this like over the last couple of years, is just like consistently working with people who are considerably better than ourselves at what they do, right? So, you know, bringing in, like, something that we haven't done too much in the past is work with outside directors. But this is definitely something that's at the forefront of our focus if and when the opportunity presents itself. Obviously, there's a budget thing that needs to be achieved in order to do that when it comes to a certain level of director. But it also unlocks the opportunity to explore a reasonable sized job multiple at the same time. So they can control the creative and the pre-production process, and we can be doing 2, 3, 4 good-sized jobs with good-sized crews in different locations at any given time. And it's something that we haven't done, but we're currently going through right now, and it's been a great experience just working with these incredibly talented and experienced directors. I think that is one way that you could maybe leapfrog, and leapfrog a step in the process is just handing it off and getting it to the people who have done it before.
Yeah, because you'll learn things along the way that you normally wouldn't have on your own,
Absolutely.
right? Just because their work, when you're talking about those types of directors, they're doing that constantly, and they're used to a certain standard. And we started from watching YouTube, right? We just aren't going to learn that stuff unless you're on those bigger sets, which those guys are on almost all the time, right? So it's almost like we're stealing, or not even stealing knowledge, which is copying knowledge.
It's like peeking into it, because they live and breathe it, right? If you get a master, like someone who is a master at that one particular job, and you bring them in to execute it, you learn what works in your process even over time as well, when you have to start bringing in other people. And like when Dario and I were doing the whole production process from start to finish, including the shooting, rarely hiring other people, everything was very generalized because our roles were generalized. But then the second we started hiring people, which we started doing about a year ago, making it almost like a mandatory thing to have our crews be at least 4 or 5 people at a minimum, it allowed us to start breaking down the roles, breaking down the creative that goes into each of those roles, and realizing what works in the process, what doesn't work in the process, how to manage it with the client, how to improve it over time as well. The second you start bringing in other people, then you can see the flaws in your whole process.
And learning from the crew, because every now and then a crew member would suggest something that we never even thought about. And that, I'll give you an easy example. Our gaffer was asking us if we use this LiDAR app to scan the rooms and everything, because we can create setups that way. And we're like, what is this thing?
It was wild.
So it's called Polycam, and it's a LiDAR app for iPhone. If you have an iPhone 12 Pro, you can use it. And we've been doing that for location scouts ever since, because we could just scan the rooms, create floor maps. It helps a ton, right? So, but that's something we wouldn't have learned on our own. You know what I mean? It's something that someone else brought in with their experience, right?
Everyone has different experiences that you could always learn from. There have been even times where, if when we've hired DPs to help us shoot a few things, we've noticed that was interesting how they decided to light that interview, at least as an instinct, right? Oh, that's pretty cool how they went about doing that shot. This gives me ideas on things we could do for other projects. You got to learn from the people you work with. I feel like that is a good way to do it. And like you said, surround yourself with people that can do it better, and you will learn and elevate yourself over time as well.
100%.
So we're nearing almost the hour mark. So I will answer your Toronto question.
Yeah.
The Toronto market question first, then I'll ask you one last one, then we're good. So as for the Toronto market, I think it's very diversified from what we've noticed. There's a bit of everything. I don't think it's one of those cities where if you go to the middle of Canada, it'll be very agricultural focused, or it'll be a bigger portion of the pie. Or if you go to the last guest we had on is in Seattle. Over there, it's very tech focused, from what they were telling us. Here, I would say it's very diversified. There's a strong financial tech, maybe not a strong agricultural part to it, but there's about everything here. So I don't think it's too focused on a particular industry. I would say, at least from what we've experienced and from the other Toronto-based companies we've spoken to.
You got a pretty good film community there too, huh?
Yeah. We're New York. We're Canadian New York. So you have people making movies here. There's a ton of companies here doing corporate as well. It's funny, when we started the podcast, that was one of the things that we were interested in doing, is just networking with other local production houses, because it's there's a ton of us out there and we kind of all know about each other, but no one ever talks to
each other. No one talks to each other here. No one does.
You almost never run into them. Sometimes you might be bidding for the same project, but that's bidding, not whatever. I need some water.
Bidding and pitching.
Sometimes you might be bidding for the same project and you might not even know it. It's like it was one of those types of situations. But yeah, the amount of work that is here, I would say, there's a ton of work. I mean, every company needs video at the end of the day, and not just one. They need a ton of video content, and there are a ton of businesses here in Toronto.
Yeah, especially if you're starting out.
I saw, yeah, that's actually to the point I was going to make. You mentioned on one of the previous podcasts that you were kind of concerned about the Canadian budgets compared to the US market. Is that still the case? Like, is it pretty significant?
So they do listen to the episodes.
They actually do listen. Yeah, I like that he's bringing in these points. I mean, yeah, like because what we were talking about in that episode was essentially like the companies that are US based that have offices in Canada. You can't expect them to be.
It's not the headquarters, so the budget isn't going to be that high, right? Also, if they're marketing to the Canadian market, like we're population of what, 35 million? How much do you think? And then a smaller portion of that is their actual target market compared to the US, where it's like 350 million population. Like it's just, you can't compare to that, right? So
could happen at Target.
I don't even know if like that's the budgets are that different down there. That's just what I always assume, just because, you know, the company headquarters are all down there, so they probably reserve more money for stuff there, right? That's what I always assume, but I don't know how it is. Like,
just to kind of stress that this is only for like a specific type of clientele. That wasn't like a general comment in terms of like all the companies that are in Toronto. It was more so like some companies that have like a small office in Toronto, or like you know, it's more remote.
Well, no, you know what it is? It's basically, if it's a business that is it's not applicable to businesses that are headquartered here, I would say. But most businesses are headquartered in the US.
Major ones, at least.
So, major one. If you're a Fortune 500, you're headquartered in the US,
most
right?
of the time.
Got it. Well, it's something that, I mean, you just guys, you'll find the bigger budgets, you know, if you just keep going, you know, like they'll come across. I mean, it just seems like, yeah, I don't know. One day, maybe, I don't know.
Slowly.
A big one will just land in your lap. You'll be like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Most of our projects are in the medium range now. Like we're kind of like small to medium still.
But you know that terminology, Kyrill, it differs depending on who we're talking to.
It depends on the company, yeah.
Because our version of medium is probably way different from his version of medium.
You know, here's the funny thing. I feel like every production company in their own minds, they're always in the small to medium range. Always. No matter what stage in career you're in your mind, you're always going to be in the small to medium range.
That's fair.
So what are some next steps, Adam, for you guys in terms of like what are some things you have in the works or want to do in this year?
So we want to keep developing relationships with agencies, market and ad agencies, just kind of build out those relationships. Something that we've done in the past, and we have some agency partners. It's just that's kind of the direction that we want to go, because we want to get that type of work that they have. So reaching out, connecting, grabbing lots of coffees and lunches with these key creative directors and producers at agencies is one thing that we is at the forefront of our like networking game. In terms of like just production side of things, just keep improving. Again, I think the main focus for me, like for the company, is to just keep bringing on talented and better creatives. Keep bringing in the jobs that enable us to work with the best of the best, essentially. And I think just with that mindset in mind, you know, things will only improve across the board. We'll learn a lot from them. Our portfolio will improve. The client experience will improve. It's just like there's a ripple effect that comes from working with the best people. But obviously that comes from getting the jobs that attract the best people as well. So.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good mantra to keep going, you know, and continue those incremental and minor improvements on a daily basis, right? That's essentially it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so right before we end off, tell us how you came up with the name Digital Sparks Studios.
Oh, God. You know, I'm not crazy about the name. Like, first of all, like most people don't understand what I'm saying when I say it because of my accent. And that's a big problem when you're trying to tell people where to find you. So it was just like, you know, me, my business partner, 2015, just kind of sitting across the desk from each other, just trying to rapidly Googling things that were available on GoDaddy as available domain names. And we knew we wanted like the word digital in there, and it just evolved from there. It was just a little bit of a riff off until we got to it, but not crazy about the name, but it's stuck now. There's no changing it. We can't do anything about it now.
I like it.
It's always cool to hear like it's almost like the origin story.
I wish
in
I
a
had
way.
something more interesting to share about it, but it really was quite just all right, we need a name list. Let's go to town on Google and figure it out.
I actually have one more question that I did want to ask, and I wanted to ask it right from the get go. But like, so who's the Arsenal fan over there?
Who is the Arsenal fan? This guy.
This guy. Oh, all right. So you're buzzing right now, aren't you?
I am on cloud nine. I can't even begin to tell you. Like, and I really don't like how much they impact my overall mood. I'm Arsenal day one, man. My whole life been following them. So
Jesus, yeah. Considering Arsenal had like Dario, this soccer team went through like a period of like 3 years where it was just constant disappointment because I have an Arsenal friend too, and just seeing the pain on his face.
Dude, 12 years. Like, it was so bad. Yeah, it's been bad.
I've also been suffering too on what was it, like an 8-year period or 9-year period, and now it's starting to actually kind of slowly come back up. Guess which club I support.
Okay, so 8-year period. Come back up. It's coming back up now, or is it? Oh, is it Liverpool?
Why did you let him? You should let him guess.
Oh no, I'll let him guess again.
Oh, is it?
Guess.
If you're on the way up, it's got to be Man United, right?
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. You've been going through it rough. I've enjoyed like laughing with you, but while crying about Arsenal over the last few years. So yeah, man, it's looking good for both of us right now.
Yeah, if we could just nudge City out of the way, then it'll be back to like the glory days in the mid 2000s, right? When it was just United and Arsenal. That was a legendary era.
That was the good times right there. Yeah.
We should connect you with Judah Hernandez from Black White Media, who was on the podcast last year. I think he's episode 20 something. He actually used to be a soccer player before he switched into video production, and he opened up an office in the U.S.
For his
production company.
Which city?
I think he's in Miami. I think in Miami.
Oh, that's a bit further than Charlotte, though.
But he's going out to Miami for his shoot.
That's actually a good idea. If you want, we could connect you to Judah.
Yeah, for sure. Connect us. That'd be great.
Okay, well, Adam, thank you so much for coming on. If you guys want to either rent equipment or rent a studio space or hire Adam's company for your production, then hit him up at digitalsparkstudios.com or just, I don't know, get in touch with us and we'll connect you to him.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest, if anything.
Anyways, thank you again, Adam.
Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it. I really appreciate you getting me out of like a backlog of meetings. This was really fun.
All right, thanks, man.
All right, guys. Take care.
Take care.